As a young girl, Connie Siskowski slept in the living room, giving her grandfather medications during the night. With caregiving skills learned at a young age, she later became a nurse and discovered that 1.4 million children from ages 8 to 18 were also caregiving family members. That led her to found AACY, the American Association of Caregiving Youth.
So we're just privileged to, fortunately, several of us had a chance to meet, privileged to have Connie Siskowski join us today. And she's one of these American heroines who has championed a cause that's little known, little understood, acknowledged, and definitely not brought into public awareness until Connie came on the scene. She's experienced this phenomenon herself of caregiving family members firsthand, because as a young girl, she was caring for her grandfather, slept in the living room, awakening him in the wee hours to provide meds night after night. So as time marched on, she realized other children and teens performed similar functions to the tune of 1.4 million around the country, ages 8 to 18. And as a young adult, she went on, earned her RN degree at Johns Hopkins University, bachelor's degree at Montclair University, master's of public health, MPH at NYU, and then moved to Florida and earned her PhD from Lynn University in Boca Raton. Connie went on to be the founder of AACY, which is the American Association of Caregiving Youth. She's received numerous awards for her work, including being a CNN Top 10 Hero in 2012, recipient of the Ashoka Lifetime Fellowship Award. She won a Purpose Prize. I was the recipient of that with her Caregiving Youth program. And the work and that of her staff and her volunteers is nonstop. It's stressful, and through all the tireless effort of all of them, she's found joy in connecting youthful caregivers with resources in Palm Beach County, where AACY is located, including services now offered like respite for the caregivers, fun camps, mentoring, and much more. But Connie has an even higher goals, because as she said, this is a calling, and it compelled her, it still does, and now she's looking at the form of proposed national legislation for these caregiving youth. Her workload's intense, it's admirable, and we are honored to have you with us, Connie. So welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Connie and also to Vicki, who will do a hybrid combination of a short video, interview, and discussion. So from all of us, welcome Connie Siskowski, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. So, Vicki, did you want to go ahead and with your interview, and then we can proceed?
I guess we have to figure out where we fit the balance of your video and your slides. So what I'd like to start out by doing is just tell us how you became interested in healthcare in general as a young girl, and then as a student, and in particularly your PhD.
So, yeah, it is a bit of a story, but I didn't realize how impactful taking care of my grandfather and then finding him no longer breathing when I was 13, when I went to give him medication in the middle of the night, was on my adult life. And it was really not until I was in counseling after my third marriage that it was pointed out to me how much not only the trauma that I went through, because it's different when you're a young girl caring for someone of the opposite gender. So that was one thing, but also, the death experience, and maybe even more so because he was so important to me growing up, and now he was gone. So then you have the trauma of abandonment. And so I think after I had learned that, first of all, I'll go back that my grandfather had heart disease. And so what a surprise, I became a cardiac nurse. And then, my career in healthcare pretty much was broad. And I had always tried to solve problems. So actually, I was waiting to go into a meeting at the National Council on the Aging and saw a brochure called Faith in Action, and it was a program sponsored by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And having done work in hospice and home care, I was moved by what happens when people are alone at home, and also about the need for caregiving families. So we had applied for a grant, and we started with $25,000 from that foundation to begin what was called at that time Boca Raton Interfaith in Action. So, you know, the issue of family caregiving has certainly grown over the years. And I think that, you know, as people started paying more attention to it, there was a national organization founded called the National Family Caregivers Association, and that was in the United States. But there was a first international conference on family caregiving in 1998 in London that I had the opportunity to go to, and there is where I learned about what they call young carers and how much support the UK has given to that population. And so, you know, seeds were planted along the way in my life. And after I came back, I went on a mission trip with kids from my church and learned about how, like, one of the boys' dad had just died, another girl's dad had pancreatic cancer. And so it was, again, something planted in me. And so, so it was hard starting a nonprofit, and the Faith in Action programs had primarily been associated with one congregation. But then, because our population in Palm Beach County is pretty diverse, as you may have read, and it's been in the news, that we knew we couldn't, you know, be attached to one congregation, because then it puts up a barrier. And what we really need to do is reduce obstacles for people to get help and support. So that's why we became Boca Raton Interfaith in Action. So now we're a couple of years later, and one of my friends from New Jersey, which is where I grew up, and from Hopkins, introduced me to what became my fourth husband, and we're still married today, like almost 20 years later. And his whole career was in the pharmaceutical industry. So, you know, when you're in that for-profit mode, you and somebody has a PhD, you earn more money. So he thought it would be a great idea for me to go back to school, which I did. And it was to have a bigger voice for all family caregivers, really never expecting to discover the extent of this population. So I was able to do my research by hooking on to a county-wide survey to ask kids what helps them learn and what doesn't. And we discovered that about 1 in 3 of the children were doing some level of caregiving and were either missing school, not doing their homework, having trouble focusing, or some combination. And so I shared that data, and ultimately the first national study was done that showed the 1.3 to 1.4 million children. So with that came some media attention, and soon after that, there was another report funded by the Gates Foundation called the Silent Epidemic, and it showed that of young people who had dropped out of school, 22% said it was to care for a family member. So between our data in Palm Beach County, the national data, and the media attention so that people could see what was going on, because essentially, you know, when you're a caregiving youth, you don't go to school and talk about it. The work that you do is behind closed doors. And so we got funding and began the first Caregiving Youth Project in 2006 at one middle school. We're currently in 33 schools in Palm Beach County and have served over 1,800 kids and their families. So it's not like, you know, with some programs you might, and certainly with COVID, there's so much attention to food and basic needs. So it's not like, somebody's hungry and you can give them a meal and they're no longer hungry. With caregiving and chronic illnesses and disabilities, it goes on and on and on, and it becomes really difficult for the kids. So while we say, it's more than 1,800 families, these kids stay with us for more than 5.5 years. So they enter in 6th grade and continue through high school graduation. We're very proud of our 6-year high school graduation rate, which is 98.3%. And only 16% of our families are Caucasian. And so along with being minorities, many of them are financially insecure. So that's really a critical factor when you think about, what's happened with COVID and the focus on health disparities, that, the focus is on the person with the illness. It's not on the family. And that's the same when you look at many systems looking at the illness. And when there is a chronic illness or other disabilities, it's the whole family that's impacted. And even, with the VA system, right? As a military person can come home and be fine, but now the spouse has cancer, or the grandmother has moved in and now she's had a stroke or Alzheimer's disease, or there could be children in the family who have disabilities, but the VA system is focused on the individual, on the veteran. So hopefully one day we'll be able to move our systems to a more family-centered care, because that's where we need to get to.
So
Vicki, you look like you wanted to ask a question.
I do, because I want to know, you might want to do it with your shared screen, but I'd like to have you describe the services that the American Association of Caregiving Youth provides.
Sure. So I have a few different slides, but I can certainly go right to that one, I think.
Whatever you did, it brightened your face.
Pardon me?
Whatever you did, you have a brighter face.
Uh-oh.
We don't need to do this, because I have a lot of other questions. The word "uh-oh" always scares me.
Okay, but these are the services that we provide. So in school, at home, and out of school. So these are the direct services that work to not only help the youth, but also to strengthen the family. Because a lot of times what's going on in the family is impacting the stress on the child. And so if you can reduce that, it can help the whole family and the child.
There are at least 1.3 million children who are caregiving in the United States.
Oh, you okay? My mom is a 3-time cancer survivor.
My biggest fear is finding out she's in the hospital when I get home from school.
She might end up face down in the backyard.
As a result of caregiving, children sacrifice their education, they sacrifice their well-being, they sacrifice their childhood. Our healthcare system has many gaps. Families are struggling, and they don't have the disposable income to hire help at home.
I helped my mom care for my brother Isaac. I first started caring for Isaac when I was 11 years old. I helped my mom bathe him, feed him. I also helped change his diaper, put on clothes.
Let's go, guys.
Before I got into the Caregiving Youth Project, I mainly felt stressed.
Having experienced some of that myself allows me to better understand what these families are going through. When I was growing up, my grandfather and I were really close, and he had congestive heart failure. I did everything for my grandfather the night that he died. I was the one who found that he was no longer breathing, and I can still feel what his skin felt like at that time. I remember I didn't cry until
after the lab, we're going to go over the periodic table.
Working with the children and seeing their lives transformed makes me get up every day. Our society loses if we do not support these children.
Oh my God, look at that.
In school, we offer skills building. We offer families a home visit to see what other needs the families might have. You have a couple of steps to go up to get Isaac into the house.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get a ramp built.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Fun activities are important because it allows the child to experience a piece of childhood that they otherwise might not.
It helps my confidence.
I feel that they have my back.
I want to tell the world this organization is amazing. It really helps, and it's all thanks to Dr. Connie. I love her so much.
Rose, you're gonna get it!
So in keeping with this theme and purpose, so, you know, not all caregiving is negative, certainly. And so when you take care of someone, that relationship changes and it becomes more special than one would realize. And as you can see, there's also a sense of purpose. So one of the things that we've discovered, and it's just anecdotally at this point, is what happens when the person is no longer caregiving. You know, what fills that void of purpose?
Now, you won the Purpose Prize.
Mm-hmm.
And describe how you won it, and probably a little bit more defined about your purpose and how perhaps purpose may change.
So in terms of purpose, doing this program with you, Vicki, and Joyce, it really made me think about, you know, what is purpose, and is purpose something that comes from the outside in, or does it come from the inside out? And, you know, there's more within our country right now, and in recent past, there's more of a focus on change coming from the inside out. And for me, I think when I heard the results of my research and the profound results, and actually the gentleman who was the principal investigator had called me. I was sitting right here where I am right now, or talking to him on the phone, and he told me that of the whole survey, which was it was 88 questions, that these findings were the most profound. And so like this overwhelming feeling just came over me, like, I've got to do something about this. I've got to help these kids because, you know, they shouldn't have to suffer long term, even short term, as I did. So, you know, in a sense, you know, many people have said that like it's a calling. And so it wasn't something that I set out to do. And so, you know, I don't know if there's really a distinction. You know, this calling became my purpose. But it wasn't something that, you know, I thought about doing intellectually at any point in my life. In fact, I never thought I would be doing this.
You thought you'd remain in the healthcare as a nurse, or maybe an administrator, or just advancing up the ladder, particularly as it relates to heart health care.
And Vicki, actually, you know, my parents were divorced. We didn't have any money. I wanted to go to college. You know, I didn't especially want to go to nursing school, but I got a scholarship. And so it's like, that's where I went. You know, plus it allowed me to leave home and go to Baltimore.
Okay.
Not that Baltimore was a great place during that time, by the way, because I happened to be there for the riots. But it was an experience.
Okay. You have a lot of people who step up to mentor and tutor your students. Describe the relation. I met Elliot. Describe Elliot in the role he played with this young Black child. I don't know how old he was. And talk about the evolution and process of that child moving on.
Yeah, so we have a program called MACY, Mentor Caregiving Youth. And when a person mentors one of our kids, or really probably any mentor situation, it becomes a special relationship. And Elliot is a successful businessman in the finance industry. And we introduced him to Mark Charles, who was a caregiver and was really struggling academically as well as personally. And so Elliot would meet him. They'd, meet at McDonald's or wherever. And he really encouraged him and encouraged his schooling, encouraged him academically, and let him know that he could succeed. Because, when you're in an environment where maybe your family isn't educated and you have the feeling that, you're not going to do well, that you're kind of stuck, to have somebody who has been successful take a real interest in you and be there for you. So Elliot and Mark Charles continued probably for about 3 years till he graduated last year. And Elliot, during the holidays, sent me a text that he had gotten from Mark Charles to show that he had made the dean's list at college.
That's really cool. Really.
But I'd like to go back just a second for purpose, to look at the purpose. And Mandy, who you saw, her family kind of split up. She wasn't a caregiver anymore. She became pregnant. And so when we look at some of our students, and if they, their family member dies or whatever happens within the family and they're no longer caregiving, what fills that vacuum for them? And it's about relationship, and it's about giving and receiving love. And so she had a baby. We were able to, somebody donated a car for her, so she was able to get around. She finished high school, and she's currently in nursing school. She married the father of the baby, and he's now 4 or 5. Amazing. And so, it's something that we have to look at. There's really very little research in this whole area. There's little research regarding caregiving youth. And right now we have one of our partners is University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. And so we have some medical students who are also earning their MPH, doing a couple of different research projects. Because our kids do what adult caregivers do, except they don't have the experience base. And so almost 20% of our kids give medication. What we did, actually, there's a journal article that we were able to publish after doing focus groups with the kids. And, from a public health perspective, from a society perspective, one of the questions we asked was, well, after you give an injection, what do you do with the needle? Well, I wrap it up in a paper towel and I put it in the garbage. Well, then what happens? What if somebody gets stuck? So, this is a very complex issue. It's not an easy one, like feed someone and they're no longer hungry, because we work between systems of healthcare, education, and the community. We all have been stressed at one time or another, perhaps a little more so with COVID in recent months. And so when we're under stress, it's really hard to learn. So a lot of our work focuses on reducing the stress of the child, to know that they're not alone, and to be able to, have some fun, have some time to be a kid, and also to honor what they're doing, so that we're able to award community service hours to high school students. We worked that out with the school district, and so that's something that we're offering to others. Our work is not only in Palm Beach County, it is in Palm Beach County with direct services. However, we also began the Caregiving Youth Institute. We've had a couple of conferences. We're having a virtual conference in April, on April 22nd, and then we'll hopefully have an in-person conference, because this subject is gaining more attention nationally. And thankfully, now I'm on the faculty for the Raised Family Caregiver Council, which is through HHS, and they are looking at caregivers of all ages, finally.
So if they do that, that's government, right? So
Right.
those kids who are caregivers would be able to receive some of the funding that those 18 and over receive, if that goes through, correct?
Well, it's not just about funding, it's about support, and I don't know with labor laws that they would want to give children funding, but, maybe set up a scholarship pool, find a way to recognize them, because they are doing the work of a home health aide in many cases. So there's one of the things that happened recently, actually, is that each year through the CDC, there's what's called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And in Florida, we were finally able to get a question onto it. It's administered by the Department of Health. And through it, we found that there's more than 290,000 middle and high school kids who are in public schools who are doing some type of caregiving. So that number is huge. We have many counties in Florida where the high school graduation rate is even less than 80%. And then, that impacts all of us, because each time a child isn't able to graduate from high school, their earning potential is less. And they're more likely to do drugs and disease and teen pregnancy and become system dependent. Whereas if they're supported, many, like Mandy, want to go into healthcare. And as our population ages, where do we need people? Where do we need a labor force?
I want to go back to, how did you get all the schools in Palm Beach County? Is it Palm Beach County?
Yeah.
To be able to work with you guys, with the National Association of Caregivers. So you have a number of schools that are in the system that you're helping out. Then you have to provide support to each one of those schools. Describe that process.
So we have strategically grown as we've gotten funding. I mean, they would like us to be in all the schools, because we are making the schools better. While we're a guest in the school, we're an outside agency coming in. So our family specialists are MSWs, and they're assigned to different schools where we do an eligibility process in 6th grade to identify the kids that are in the top levels of responsibility, so that we can focus on them. So, in a way, some schools may not like having outside people come in, but on the other hand, because we are helping their kids, and helping them graduate, helping them be successful, it speaks well for the schools.
Okay. So how many schools participate? How many schools are you in?
So right now we're in 33 schools, 20 middle schools, 13 high schools, and we have what we call outlier students who are in 23 other schools. So those are kids who have been referred by agencies or self-referred or have been in our program, and then their family moves and they move to an area where the Caregiving Youth Project is not in their school.
So let's take it like, how does this, it's such an important service that you provide. And how can this expand beyond Palm Beach? How can more kids that are caregivers not in Florida who can take advantage of your services, how are you intending to expand that?
Well, Vicki, it's a challenge because without the government recognizing the children yet, there isn't funding. And so by working with some disease-specific organizations that are doing this, we also work with a couple of organizations that support military children. That's one way. We started developing an affiliate network, but again, without funding, and this has not been a time of wealth for nonprofit organizations, that it's difficult, even if they start serving, if they're serving adult family caregivers, for them to expand their reach. So having more data, and I think having the Florida data is going to help. There was just a new study released in May 2020 that looked at, it's called Caregiving in the US 2020, and there the number of caregivers, caregiving children who are in families with adult caregivers who are caring for adult is about 3.4 million. And so that doesn't include, children in single parent households or single grandparent households. And, for these kids, it's even more of a challenge because there's always the worry in the back of their mind, what's going to happen to me? Because they are kids after all, right? And so you still have a little bit of that egocentric view. And actually, one of our boys was living with his single grandmother, and he would wake up at night when she got up to go to the bathroom because he was so afraid that she would fall. So these kids worry about, their loved one when they're not with them. However, during COVID, they're maybe with them too much. And so that has made the pendulum swing because they're not only having trouble with virtual learning, but also their caregiving hours have expanded, and some of the families have COVID. Their jobs have been lost. We've had to step up a little more to try and meet some basic needs.
So these kids then are in shelter and are at home, and so they're learning at home.
They're trying to learn at home. Yeah. Right. Without proper, sometimes proper supervision, having a family member who doesn't speak English and is unable to understand, what's going on. And in the beginning, good grief, we had one situation where one of our girls who was caring for her grandfather who had Alzheimer's disease, he had taken a shower and he walked behind her with just a towel on, and her teacher freaked. And so it really was traumatic for this student because, there's not an understanding. This information isn't yet included in curriculum, either of healthcare or education or people in the community. And if people in community organizations don't have any kind of background, they don't understand the impact of family health situations on the family. So, for example, I was meeting with a woman who was involved in kinship care, and that seems like it would be a natural fit. But she was telling me about this grandmother who was raising 3 orphan grandchildren, and the grandmother was going to dialysis and everything was fine, because families are afraid that the kids are going to be taken away. And, there's pride. you don't want to show your weakness. You want to show your strength, and that you can do this because and when kids are being raised by grandparents, whether it's opioid related or incarceration or whatever, those kids have already been through one trauma. And so here they are, in a situation worried about, is their grandparent going to survive?
So if a grandparent dies and they're taking care of that person, they lose that family connection.
Right. And so, that's why we're on the preventive side of kids going into foster care, because say a grandparent has a terminal illness or even a single parent. And then, in one situation, we were able to hook this boy up with a family that had sons, to be a foster family when his mom died, so that the transition was a little easier because she didn't have other family around. So, there's no recipe. It's like you have to be creative and be good problem solvers for each unique situation.
Well, it is, we've got time now, and what I'd like to do is for anyone who might have a question of Connie, we will turn it over to those who would like to ask Connie a question. And anyone have a question? Go ahead, Barbara.
Connie, what a fantastic program. What about respite services?
Yeah, so we provide respite. We have a special respite fund. And so we subcontract that with a home care company. And we've also focused on youth-directed respite. So, if a child doesn't like to clean, but doesn't mind giving an injection, we're starting to work with some cleaning companies so that they can, do that service without more cost. We've provided prepared meals for the families. Right now, we're working on a new project with a small grant that we received to do Instacart for some of our families, because if you go and pick up food, that food is not specific to your family, or it's canned goods. And so we're trying this with Instacart. You can have up to 50 different addresses for delivery, and we're going to see how it works, so that then while we have like a basic list, people can make choices within that list and within our budget that can be culturally sensitive. And plus, as time has gone on, you hear about some of the Instacart people getting laid off. And so this provides a job opportunity too for people who are Instacarters.
So I'll keep going through this. And thank you. That's just a wonderful service and so important. To the social.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Barbara.
Okay. Do your social workers provide counseling?
Yeah, we have a behavioral health care manager who, so we identify kids that are in need of individual counseling, and we do that for a certain amount of time. And then if the situation is more intense, that we'll refer them out. One of the challenges that we confronted recently that we were surprised with was this one student had become involved with anime as part of her virtual education and whatever. And she was depressed because her mom had to devote so much time to her sister who has special needs, and she did too, that somebody from some part of the world in anime had instructed her how to commit suicide by drowning.
Oh my God.
And so, we learned that there's no oversight of anime.
Wow.
Wow.
I never heard of anime.
It's Gary, you look like you were going to comment.
Gary,
It's a Japanese, like an animated cartoon characters. And some are on the dark side, I understand, and some are very, fine and light and fun.
There are a lot that have a wide variety of instruction on how to do many, many, many things.
On anime? Really?
Anime, yeah. And so, Vicki, we'll help bring you into the 21st century on that one. So I'll work with you on that.
Okay. But I want the more positive side. Go ahead.
I never heard of it either.
First of all, I would just like to say that I had the privilege to work with Connie at one of our senior living communities in Florida. And the work she does is she's an angel. What else can I say? It's God's work. And I'll never forget one night when I sat with a group of kids and a couple of folks from our foundation, and just to listen. The kids came together for the first time. There were about 7 or 8 of them, just to sit and share their stories with each other about what it's like to be a caregiver. And it was so interesting to me because no matter how dark the story was or how light the story was, it was palpable. You could feel how the very fact that they shared their stories lifted their spirits. And I would watch kids, leave those meetings chatting with one another. Well, hey, you know what happened to me? And you could hear them tell their story. And the other one would do the, oh my gosh, that happened to me, but you know what? It was even worse for me. And yet you would run into these kids a week later, and there was already, just from the storytelling session, I saw camaraderie that I couldn't believe. And
yeah, it's a very special bond.
It is. So what she does is phenomenal. And 33 schools, Connie, holy buckets. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I have a question. In the work I'm doing with grandchildren right now in the field of dementia care, I've run into some real challenges with blended families. And I'm wondering if you have found that in your work too, where you'll have a sibling in that family that needs care. And in the blended family, does the non-blood sibling find it difficult to care as much? Or if they care more, does it create problems in blended families in responding to the person who needs care?
Gary, honestly, I don't think that we've really looked at that. But I bet it's like in any other family, whether you need care or not. With blended families, there's so many different dynamics.
Right.
And I think, also the attitude of the rest of the family, how supportive they are and how accepting each person is, can really make a difference.
Sure. Yeah.
I have a question. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I love who she is and what she does. She's an incredible lady.
Paul, you're on mute.
Got to remember that mute button all the time. Connie, thank you for sharing that information. That was just marvelous. It's so impressive to hear the work that you've done, and especially the work that these young adults are doing to help their family and their community. Just a couple questions. Is there an association or is there a branch of your service in Connecticut?
In Connecticut, we haven't, I don't believe anybody has reached to us from Connecticut. There's some activity in the Boston area right now, but we're certainly open to that. Our vision was really to develop an affiliate network kind of as a nonprofit franchise and just be able to to provide, the information. We don't feel like it's necessary for people to have to reinvent the wheel and lose time, because it's taken so long for this to evolve and to know kind of what works and what doesn't work.
The reason I ask is I've been a long-term volunteer with the Visiting Nurse Services of Connecticut, and I could see where the services and the mentoring and the relationship between visiting nurse services and home health care people in the home could fit so nicely into the work that you and your people have done elsewhere. And if we could get the word out to the major hospitals or the major VNSs and VNAs in throughout the states, I'm speaking specifically of Connecticut, it would be such a help to everybody involved. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, just yesterday we did grand rounds with one of the University of Miami hospitals. And, it's like, it takes a while for light bulbs to turn on, but finally when they do. And so one of the pediatricians, because that's what we've tried to do, is educate pediatricians so that they know to ask when they see a student. But one of the people that came forward has responsibility for 15 school health clinics in the Miami area. Mm-hmm. So the need is universal. So we just have to get, it raised up. I think one of the barriers has been because the National Family Caregiver Support Program, which was first signed by President Clinton in 2000, was attached to the Older Americans Act. So as money has come down, it's been through like the Department of Elder Affairs, and with the whole tsunami of adult family caregivers, that has taken the bulk of the money. And so even like with AARP, there's not the embracing of the children, even though the children may be taking care of older people. Although recently, there was a small study done of 400 college students, and AARP was involved with that. And of those 400, 55% had said that they started caregiving before they went to college. But there's no doubt that this is a factor for college incompletion. Mm-hmm. And it's going to really be interesting to see now what happens as, with the whole college scene as virtual classes, that whole thing. There's so many uncertainties right now within the whole education system.
It just seems that your program is so tailor-made and so needed that, as you said, we need to help somebody realize and get the light turned on. They don't even know this. They don't know where the switch is just yet, and we need to help them do that. Yeah. But
Well, and hopefully it's not going to take too many turns of that light bulb, but it does.
Now, it's interesting because AARP does a lot with grandparents raising grandchildren. It would seem like this would be a good opportunity to go back to AARP with many of these grandchildren are taking care of their grandparents.
Right. And no, that's absolutely true, Vicki, but there's still, even though grandparents raising grandchildren were included under Title III-E, there was no forethought about what happens when the grandparents get sick. And so, that's still one of the areas, and it seems like the logical area, since that population was already recognized, to make some progress. So we're meeting with a couple of companies that, including RAND, that are interested in doing some more in that area.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Connie, do you have an intake system and a documentation system so that you know what the outcomes are, kind of tracking these kids and then the measurement of outcome?
Yeah, we certainly do. And actually, I won't. We have a web-based data management system so that we track everything. And with the school district, they just started a new integrated program where we document what we do for every student. But we also have an end of the year survey. And also because of our agreement with the school district, we get information on the students at least twice a year so that we can follow grade improvement, because we don't intend to spend limited dollars on tutors if it's not working.
Okay, anyone else have a question for Connie?
Yeah. Given what you just shared, Connie, about AARP and what strides were already made there, is there anything that others, other say of us, could do to support that whole inroad to help you be able to have that serve the populations that you are doing so much with?
Well, I certainly welcome that. I have been at some meetings and participated with people from AARP who have not necessarily been open. And again, there's so many adult family caregivers until that light bulb goes on about the impact and really the role of the children in family care and moving more towards family-centered care. It's very difficult. And I think also, I think there are just some new statistics to show how many people live alone as our population is aging. And certainly the number of people per household has gone down. And so if people are thinking about this for the future, we really need to do some things differently. There's a group in California called the Care Generation, and they're trying to develop a program to provide stipends to young people, maybe right out of high school, to work in terms of providing like caregiver type services to people who don't have it.
Huh. Is that something we could Google?
Connie,
Care Generation?
Sure, you can try. I tried the other night. I'm on some committee with them because they're trying to get some legislation, but there's also a few others that have a similar name, and I pointed that out to them, but they feel like they have enough strength that they'll overcome that. So we'll see. There's another group called Youth Care, and again, they're out of California, and they're volunteers who provide caregiving type services. They're limited, certainly in what they can do.
Question, any more?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joyce?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, my internet just died. Now I just came back. I've been reborn here about 3 times. Have you connected with Encore at all? Are you familiar with them? ENCORE?
Yeah, I am a little bit. I haven't, I wouldn't say I've had a successful relationship because they had the
Purpose Prize.
Did they evolve something from the Purpose Prize? And
they transitioned the Purpose Prize over to AARP.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Which they've had for 2 years.
Yeah.
Now, and of course, Mark Friedman, very inventive, very creative man, changes directions like the wind sometimes.
Oh, okay.
And he's come out with a lot about working. He's really into intergenerational relationships now and working in that arena. I mean, he did what was the thing with cities? Oh God, I can't remember that. It was, I don't even know if it still exists. And
the friendly cities?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the Gen to Gen program that seems to have taken off, and it might even be worthwhile to look into. And I think there's a whole new set of people working in that now. And so there's been turnover. And I'm not sure where it is or if it might have some possibilities, Connie, but it's something for all of us to just keep in the front burner and really look at for you.
I think Encore, both you and I being Purpose Prize winners, Connie, we were blessed to have been part of Encore. when we want. And the reason is they did such a great job of outreach and promoting us in the media. I mean, I was very fortunate, as was you. And it creates and opens up then a better dialogue to a better understanding of who you are and what you do. Once it went to AARP, I continued to follow the Purpose Prize and really wanted to connect all the people. Kate, I don't know if you're on that list. Kate Schneller does a thing that brings all the Purpose Prize winners together with a newsletter and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think it really, we have not gelled. And that's unfortunate. And maybe that's something that can be looked at too. Because what are there, 120 of us now? 130, I think.
Well, and the government had started this Care Corps where you could apply within communities. So we'll see what happens. I think there's another organization called Caring Across Generations that has become quite connected with President Biden, and he has some caregiver initiatives. But you know, one of the challenges is that because the term caregiver is not well understood. So in his particular initiative, like, we were all excited, but the focus is on the caregiver who works in an assisted living facility or a skilled facility or takes care of a child, like in daycare. And so that's one of the reasons that we use the term caregiving youth and introduced it, because youth caregiver is usually related to somebody who's like in after school program taking care of youth. So that's why the family caregiver piece is important, or caregiving youth is important. And actually, the first study was called Young Caregivers in the U.S. and we began the Young Caregiver Project. But then, you know, young is so subjective, right? Many of you are young next to me or whatever, and you know, that's why we had to switch to youth, so that you know, children doing this is so off of the radar screen that somehow we had to bridge the gap as quickly as we could.
Yeah. Okay, it's 5:05. We usually start and end at this time. We invite those who, I just want to share a little bit about who's coming up next week. Next week we have Dr. Ken Brummel-Smith. He's an amazing individual. He will be our guest, and he will be talking about what's happening in COVID, what progress is being made regarding health, and he has been an advocate of how we are an over-medicated society, and we'll be addressing that whole health issue as well next week. So we hope you tune in and join us next week. Gary, you know Ken. You want to say a few words about Ken?
He was a host for, I have a First Friday at 8:30 with society members, Connie, and Ken spoke for an hour about what's going on with COVID and really about 18 or so people at that coffee, and I can guarantee you people will truly enjoy him, and so it's worth spreading the word. So
okay, John.
Nope.
Why am I?
No, you're fine.
Okay, Joyce, do you have anything you want to add?
No, we've said it all. Same time, same station next week, Dr. Ken Brummel-Smith, and we're really looking forward to having him. So by all means, share it with colleagues about coming, because he is well worth the time, as you were, Connie, and we thank you for spending this hour with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure and honor to be on your show. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. It was great, as always. You are amazing. And as Gary said, an angel. doing some wonderful work with a story that needs to be told.